know what that means. Yes, this is Crafting Can Crime Daily, and I'm your host, Crafting Journey, and on Fridays, we do the Friday dance. Yep, Friday dance. Ooh, 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 Friday dance. That's because we're happy that it's Friday and it's the weekend, and for some of you, it's payday. Now that I'm retired, I only get paid once a month. I'm trying to learn to budget so that, the money lasts all month. It's not easy. It's there. I want to spend it. Okay, so lots to get to with the Alec Murdaugh trial. Very, very interesting day yesterday. First of all, working on the diamond painting, but today starts the 24 hours of cross stitch weekend, which is once a month. I will be starting it's called the White Santa, because he's white and pink. It's kind of Christmassy. So I'm starting this today. I prepared my fabric. Yeah, probably after I get this uploaded and onto YouTube, then I'll start it. So excited for that. Okay, where am I going to put it? Okay, right there. I'm running out of robe. So the day started out with the judge explaining that he had reversed his ruling the prior day. At the end of the day, he said, he had previously ruled that the roadside shooting would not come in, that it was not related. It was didn't have anything to do with motive, although the prosecution had argued that it showed a consciousness of guilt. I don't disagree, but at the end of the day, the defense attorney opened the door by some of the questioning, and the judge changed his ruling and said, I told you this was a bridge too far, so I said this wasn't coming in, but you decided to build a road over the bridge. You've opened the door. So it's coming in. So in the afternoon, we hear all about the roadside shooting. So first, though, they put on a crime scene reconstruction person. Like, he's got a PhD in this stuff. Like, he's the doctor. Dr. McKinney, I think it was his name. And fascinating guy. He spent a lot of his time off the stand in front of the jury demonstrating angles and where he thought Maggie was and Paul was, during the shooting, and just haunting, very haunting. So with respect to Paul, he had actually gone, this expert had actually gone out to the crime scene, not during the investigation, but later on down the line. He had gone out to the kennels and done some measurements, and then he had all the crime scene photographs. And what he did was he put these digital legs in the feed room where he thought the first gunshot occurred to Paul Murdaugh. So he said Paul Murdaugh was in the feed room, which is attached to the kennels. It's just a room where they keep the feed. And he was inside that, towards the middle of the room, when he was shot, when he received the first shot. And he demonstrated, why, the way the blood fell. And, the first shot, he said, was a non-fatal wound, which we had already known. Something I did not know is that he was shot with, the first shot was buckshot. And he explained that buckshot has about 9 pellets. They're wrapped in a wad, and when they go through the chamber, the wad sort of disintegrates and these 9 pellets come out. So Paul was standing in the feed room. He was shot with this buckshot. Some of those buckshots even went through the window, but that hit him on his left side in the arm. And he said his arm would not have been up, or it would have just gone right into his chest. So at the angle that he was shot. So he was shot in the arm. That was non-fatal. And then it appears he had taken a few steps, which would explain the bloody footprint, that it was actually Paul's footprint, from the blood of the first wound. But not long after that, the second shot occurs when he's in the doorway of the feed room, and he got down and demonstrated the angle of these gunshots. And it was a very strange angle, almost like the guy was holding the gun down here and aiming upward. Yeah. And it hit him in the left chest, went through his face and into his brain. And that was birdshot, which has about 150 pellets. And he said there was no possibility that this was suicide. But here's the thing, Alex Murdaugh is very tall. He's over 6 foot tall. How is he, I don't get it. He had to be down here shooting upward. It doesn't make any sense, the angle. I mean, I believe the guy, but it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know. So anyway, that was the 12 gauge shotgun that was used in. Then he talks about Maggie's wounds. He said the first 3 shots were non-fatal. The first one was through the wrist. Second one was into her thigh above the knee, and the third one was into her abdomen. And though they were non-fatal, it would have been really, really painful, especially one to the abdomen. And he surmised that based on the 2 fatal wounds, she was likely had fallen down to her knees. And he got the prosecutor to actually kneel down, and then he demonstrated with this stick the angle of the next 2 shots. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Execution. Dick Harpootlian got up to cross-examine this guy, and he really wasn't making much progress. The first thing he does was establish that they know each other, he and this expert, that he had actually hired this expert in some of his cases. So that really lends credibility to what this guy had just said. But, he goes back and forth with him, playing ping pong and getting out the protractor. And this guy he wasn't going for it. He just stuck with his story and. All right. So the next witness after lunch was the lead investigator from SLED for the roadside shooting. Let me find my notes for that one, because it's in a different notebook. I was in a different room when I was listening to this fascinating story. His name was Agent Kelly. So he's the senior special agent with SLED, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. He said on September 4th, 2021, at about 1:36 p.m. Now, this is the same day that morning he's confronted at his mother's house by his law partners, and he's fired from the law firm for his financial crimes. And then right after that, Chris Wilson comes over there and confronts him about the $192,000 he still owes him. And then we know that Alex starts crying and saying he's addicted to drugs, and he, blah, 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 boo-hoo. So the 911 call comes in at about 1:36 p.m. And we do get to hear the 911 call. He seems very confused on this call. He said that he had pulled over for a flat tire, and that this guy had driven by and turned around and came back and shot him in the head and then took off. So she's like, well, where are you? And he says, I'm by a church, and I don't know what church it is, but it has a red roof. So they respond out there. Then there's some body cam video of Alec while he's inside the ambulance. And all you can see is his arm and the blood pressure cuff. So it wasn't like this revealing body cam video. But he's saying, someone shot me. He says, I turned my head and boom, and it sounded really loud. It sounded like a shotgun, a 22. Then he said he thought it was a GMC or a Chevy, a pickup that was dark in color. He said he only fired one shot, and then he lost his vision. He regained it after a few minutes, but initially he did lose his vision. And that part of the story never changes. So he did lose his vision for a few minutes after this. So the next day, September 5th, he meets with Randy and Alex at the hospital in Savannah. And the story he gets is very consistent with what he told the 911 operator, that a pickup had passed him, then turned around and come back. He described the person as a 30 to 45-year-old white male, nice looking, closely cropped facial hair, and someone that he did not know. He didn't know this person. So later that day, they are, at some point, they're out at the scene and they're canvassing the area, and they find a knife that across the road. The DNA on that knife came back to two people, Alex Murdaugh and a person named Curtis Eddie Smith. So on September 6th, they go back to the hospital and spend a couple hours having Alex draw this sketch. And if I can find a copy of this sketch, I'll put it up here. Looks nothing like Curtis Eddie Smith. It looks familiar, but it doesn't look like Curtis Eddie Smith. So he shows him this. He describes the guy, and they do a sketch. So later that day, he gets a call. This investigator gets a call from Randy Murdaugh saying that Alex had been trying to, he wasn't allowed to use the phone. Now, at this point, he's still in the hospital, but they're getting ready to transfer him to a detox center. So he said that, Alex was not permitted to use the phone, but that he'd been trying to bribe the nurses into letting them use his cell phone, or letting him use their cell phone. Now, I don't understand why Randy would call the lead investigator a sled and rat his brother out for making this phone call. Because there was the other piece of information that he gave the investigator was that there was an unknown number on these phone calls that he was making, and they traced it back to Curtis Eddie Smith. So I don't know why Randy would call the investigator and say, hey, my brother's trying to make phone calls, and you better, I don't know. I don't get it. Okay, anyway, except that I think maybe Randy, because Randy was part of the law firm, Randy's probably still pretty pissed off at his brother for the financial stuff. Anyway, so then they do, while they're canvassing this neighborhood, they're also trying to identify if there's any surveillance footage. And at this church with the red roof, this was St. John's Church, they did have footage that you could see the road, and they were able to identify that particular time of the day. And at 1:25 p.m. you see a blue pickup truck with a gold fender, like somebody was trying to spray paint it gold. You see this pickup truck drive in this direction. Within 20 seconds, you see a black Mercedes going in that direction, which is the vehicle Alex was driving that day. Then about 5 minutes later, at 1:30, you see the truck coming back and going the other direction. And again, Alex made that 911 call at 1:36. So what was he doing for 6 minutes? Well, we're going to find out. He was trying to get his vision back, apparently, so we could dial 911. Then on September 7th, by now, because of this unknown phone number that Alex was trying to call, traces back to Curtis Eddie Smith. They identify where Curtis Eddie Smith lives, so they go there. And when they get there, they see that there is a blue truck with a gold fender at the residence. So now they're like, oh, okay, we got our guy here. And they're like, what is going on? So they get a search warrant and they search Curtis's home, and they said it's a very modest home with a garage. In the garage they find a large amount of narcotics inside the garage, and inside the house they find a physician's desk reference, which is where you can look up drugs, and it gives you all the information on all the drugs. He had one of those, and he had notes on it, all in it. Then he also had like a notebook that looked like a sales ledger where it had dollar amounts and numbers of pills. Then they checked Curtis Eddie Smith's bank account, and there were funds in that bank account that had originated from checks written by Alex Murdaugh, both before the murders of Maggie and Paul and after the murders of Maggie and Paul. So after learning all this, the lead investigator, he reaches out to Dick Harpootlian, Alex's lawyer, and he says, I would like to interview Alex. Now, at this point, Alex is still in detox. He hasn't gone to rehab yet. He's still in the detox. And they had said, Harpootlian informs him, now he's still in the detox. And he says, well, we're willing to fly wherever he is. I think he was in Georgia somewhere. We're willing to fly wherever he is, and we will come to the interview. And Harpootlian pushes him off, and eventually that doesn't happen. But on September 13th, he does get a call from Harpootlian, and they set up a telephone interview where Dick Harpootlian, Jim Griffith are present, and they actually do the questioning. It's over the phone. It's at the rehab, and he tells them right up front, we only have 30 or 40 minutes in this room, and then there's other plans for this room. And so at this point, Alex is confessing. I lied to you. And, here's what happened. He admitted to purchasing large amounts of narcotics from Curtis Eddie Smith, that he was paying him sometimes $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a week. He said that on the morning of September 4th, after he had been fired, after he meets with Chris Wilson, he calls Curtis Eddie Smith and said, I need a favor. Can you meet me somewhere? So they meet up in one place, and then they go to another place, a Sunoco. And Alex says, things are getting really rough, and he asked him if he would shoot him. He says, I'd like for you to shoot me. I'm better off, my family's better off without me here. And well, by then the only family he's got is Buster. And Curtis said, yes, I'll do it. Never offered him any money to do it. Just said, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Now, why in the world would this guy agree to shoot and kill the guy that's giving him $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a week for pills? I think not. Okay, all right. So he says, the agreement was that Curtis would follow him, that he would stop on the side of the road, flatten the tire, that Curtis would pass him, turn around, come back, and then shoot him. And then after they leave the Sunoco, they stop at another place and they exchange weapons. Alex gives him a .38 revolver. Curtis gives him a knife. Alex used the knife. This is the knife they found across the road. He used this knife to flatten the tire. Now, this tire was one of those, what do they call those things? it's a run flat tire, so it would take a tremendous amount of damage for you not to be able to, you know, keep going on this tire. And Alex said he had run over a large object, which they never found any large object. So now he's telling him, no, I punctured it with a knife. And now that it will go flat if you puncture it with a knife. And the knife was given to him by Curtis and Eddie Smith. And then he said, where's the knife? I threw it across the road. Okay, well, he's telling the truth there, isn't he? So he said he stood close to Eddie's car, Curtis Eddie Smith's car, and he turned his head and heard a shot fired, one shot, and the guy had missed. He immediately lost his vision, and at some point he says, you know, I was about to lose everything. I was, you know, insinuating he was desperate. He needed to do something. So at the end of this interview, Alex actually says, you know, before we go, I want to apologize to you, to the investigator, for lying to you. So he said that the funds that he was giving to Curtis Eddie Smith were coming from his checking account at Palmetto State Bank, his checking account at the Bank of America, and a DBA account in the name of Forge at Bank of America. So he was stealing from his clients, putting the money into this fake Forge account, and then paying Curtis Eddie Smith $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a week for drugs. And he said he had been using drugs for anywhere, 20 years, 18 years. That's a tremendous amount of drugs. And he said the day of this roadside shooting, his last dose of these drugs had been at 4 a.m. So by the time this shooting is set up, he's actually in withdrawals, he claims. So they said, well, where was Eddie getting these drugs, Curtis Eddie Smith? And he said, from a black guy from Walterboro. That's all he knows. He'd never seen the guy, doesn't know who he is. And then he was asked, did you ever pay anyone else to get you drugs? And he said he had paid someone named Kenny Hughes a few times. So what he had done was he would call, I don't know who Kenny Hughes is, but he called this guy Kenny Hughes and he said, hey, listen, one of my clients, she's having a hard time getting pain medication from her physician, and I just really want to help her out, and could you help me get her some meds? And so he would get drugs this way. He also was paying very infrequently, he said, but one of the caretakers for his mother, a woman named Barbara, I don't think we heard from her on the stand, but she would help. He would pay her and she would give him pills. Like, oh my God. Yeah. So there was evidence that he had called Curtis Eddie Smith both from the hospital and the rehab. And he said at the time of this, shooting, he did not owe Curtis any money. He was all paid up. Now, he doesn't know whether Curtis owed anybody any money. Doesn't know. Boy, what a day. What a day of testimony. Now, what is the impact of this on the case? I think it points to him as a liar, that he'll do anything to protect himself. I think that, the world was caving in on him. And, I've seen I have covered cases on my channel now for 2 years. And I've not, most of the time, like 99% of defendants that I see show absolutely no emotion. Blank face. Alec Murdaugh sits there and cries and cries and cries and sniffling and face all red. He's an ugly crier, like me. I'm an ugly crier. And he's a very ugly crier. And he's just, I think, my sense is that he is feeling incredibly guilty for murdering his wife and son. What do you think? Leave me a comment. I'm curious. Let's do part 3 from the crime calendar. We're talking about the legend of Lavinia Fisher. Let's finish that up. Part 3 for Friday, February 17th. Okay. People's account. Now, this is the guy that sat outside. You know, he was on to her. She and her husband owned this inn where people would come in and stay for the night. They'd eat and then they'd go upstairs and they'd stay for a night. Well, this guy was catching on, and he would not sleep in the bed. He slept in a chair outside of his door. He refused to drink the tea that she offered him. She was drugging these people with tea. And then when they would go to bed, the rumor is that the bed would collapse into the floor, into a pit of snakes, and Okay. So People's account bolstered the crusade of a vigilante gang that was determined to bring the Fishers and their highwaymen to justice. David Ross, one of the vigilantes, reported that Lavinia choked him and rammed his head through a window, but he managed to escape. Wow. Lavinia and John were located and arrested, as were 2 of their fellow highwaymen. John tried to protect Lavinia during his arrest and questioning, but it was for naught. Both were convicted of highway robbery, a capital offense. Housed together at the county jail, they attempted to flee once, but the bedsheet rope broke before Lavinia could make use of it, and John wouldn't run without her. Lavinia followed John to the gallows. She died by hanging on February 18, 1820. So strange. Strange. So this is just sort of a follow-up for the weekend, since I don't do a show on the weekend. We'll say, if any of you have a message for the devil, tell me now, for I shall be seeing him shortly. That was a quote from Lavinia Fisher. That was her last words before she jumped off the gallows and hanged herself. A legend in life and as well as in death. It is said that her ghost still haunts the old Charleston jailhouse where she died. If any of you have a message for the devil, tell me now, for I shall be seeing him shortly. Hey, Alec, I got a quote for you. Yeah, no death penalty. Okay. That's the show for the day, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Whatever craft you're doing, enjoy. And I will see you Monday on Crafting and Crime Daily. Don't forget, though, I will be live on Sunday at Talk, Rebecca, Talk at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Please join me. It's just a chit chat. You know, I catch up with my friends and my subscribers, and we just have a good time. So I'll see you then or Monday. Take care, everybody. Bye.